There was another young man involved who was supposed to be these kids' dad.
Say that Ms. McKeever admitted to sleeping with 2 other men.
Been playing a big role in my son's life, far as buying him diapers, if I need money to get my kids clothes.
But he's on child support.
No, it's not my child, so why would I pay anything?
Why didn't you show up to the DNA test, young? Well, I couldn't get there. I didn't have no ride. I didn't have those. We get a ride to go everywhere else we want to go. You should not be in the position you're in right now. You're deemed to be Kenneth's father. Her sister has had to step up to the plate and help cover all these expenses.
Shoes, clothes, milk, anything that little boy needs. If she calls me, he have it.
There was another young man involved who was supposed to be these kids' dad.
The other young man that I was with, he ended up going away.
Okay.
In the courtroom setting guided by Judge Lauren Lake, every case begins with a question: what is justice? The relationship between law and justice is delicate and often uncomfortable. The law deals in evidence, procedure, and burden of proof. Justice deals with healing, closure, accountability, and emotional truth. When these two collide, the result is often conflict before clarity. This conflict becomes especially charged when DNA testing is involved. A DNA test can confirm biological paternity with scientific accuracy, but it cannot explain love, loyalty, abandonment, resentment, or pain. It can prove a biological father, but it cannot prove who nurtured a child, who stayed when things were hard, who held the child's hand on the darkest nights. This dissonance is why many people regret taking DNA tests, because while truth brings clarity, it can also bring loss. There are moments when the results of a DNA test shatter the emotional world a family believed was real. Other times, the truth brings long-awaited closure, a chance to rebuild, or the courage to walk away. Yet the emotional gravity remains. Truth changes everything. This theme is often explored in the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast, where legal experts discuss how evidence becomes a weapon or a healing tool depending on the hearts involved. When DNA evidence enters the evidence stage in a divorce case, it does not simply confirm genetic ties. It can also reframe financial responsibilities such as child support, adoption bonds, custody rights, inheritance claims, and future relationships. And when the evidence challenges assumptions, institutions of law must respond. The Supreme Court has repeatedly emphasized that biological responsibility and emotional responsibility are distinct but interconnected. A father may be legally accountable even if he never intended to be emotionally involved. A mother may face scrutiny for misrepresentation, even if her choices were rooted in survival and fear rather than deception. These are not simple situations. They are human landscapes shaped by love, insecurity, betrayal, and longing. The adverse inference in the Evidence Act comes into discussion when one party refuses or avoids testing. If a person denies a DNA test, the court may infer that they fear the truth. This legal principle reflects society's belief that hiding evidence is often equal to guilt. But reality is more complex. Sometimes individuals refuse DNA testing because they fear losing a family, a relationship, or their identity. In many adoption stories, full episodes, the fear lies in reopening emotional wounds long understood as scarred but healed. When Judge Lauren Lake approaches these emotionally charged conflicts, she stands not merely as a legal authority but as a guide. She acknowledges tears, frustration, denial, and anger. She states clearly that the courtroom is not a battlefield of insults, but a space where truth is honored and healing is possible. She reminds individuals that accountability is not humiliation. It is empowerment. Many people arrive in her courtroom believing the problem is only evidence. But the deeper struggle is identity, a child's identity, a parent's identity, a family's identity. The concept of justice in jurisprudence demands more than facts. It requires compassion and context. Without compassion, truth becomes cruelty. Without truth, compassion becomes denial. Judge Lauren Lake navigates this balance with firmness and empathy. In cheating stories, the emotional betrayal often overshadows the biological question. When partners break trust, the relationship fractures in multiple layers. romantic, parental, psychological, and social. The introduction of a DNA test in such a relationship becomes both a mirror and a sentence. It forces the couple to confront what remains when trust is gone. Sometimes the family can rebuild. Other times, the DNA result becomes a doorway leading out of marriage and into loneliness, grief, or resilience. This emotional journey echoes themes often found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Individuals speak about how they confronted painful truths, rebuilt identity, forgave themselves, and found meaning in survival. The recovery is rarely instant. Healing is a slow walk, not a sudden revelation, but acknowledging truth is the first step. This is why in these cases, Judge Lauren Lake never rushes the emotional process. She does not allow denial to masquerade as strength. She does not allow avoidance to appear as logic. She demands honesty, but she also reminds individuals that being honest is not the same as being perfect. In the child support system, emotional responsibility intersects with financial obligation. When a man is legally determined to be the father, the law expects him to provide for the child. But emotional acceptance does not happen on command. Some men feel resentment and anger when the truth is forced upon them. Others feel relief, joy, and purpose. How a person responds depends not on the DNA result itself, but on the relationship they have with the idea of fatherhood. In many adoption stories, the absence of biological connection is replaced by the presence of love, bond, and commitment. These stories reveal that love is not only genetic. Love is the daily choice to care, but the emotional meaning of genetics remains powerful, especially when a person learns as an adult that their identity was built on hidden truths. The emotional shock of discovering a biological parent long after childhood can be larger than any legal ruling. This is why people regret taking DNA tests, not because the test is wrong, but because the truth is heavier than they expected. Yet, truth remains essential. Truth allows healing. Truth prevents future conflict. Truth gives children the right to know who they are. Judge Lauren Lake believes that every child deserves clarity. Not only biological clarity, but emotional clarity. She speaks frequently about honoring the child's sense of belonging, stability, and identity. Even when adults are in conflict, the child's emotional well-being must remain at the center. And so, the courtroom becomes a place where identities are acknowledged, where secrets lose their power, and where lives begin again in a new shape. The truth may break families, but it may also rebuild them stronger. The truth may cause tears, but it also ends confusion. Truth may hurt, but it also heals, because in the end, truth changes everything. The emotional landscape surrounding DNA revelations is not just about proof of paternity. It is about identity, belonging, promises, and the silent expectations cultures place on family structures. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that the courtroom is not only a legal arena, it is an emotional crossroads. It is a space where individuals confront who they are, what they have done, what they have avoided, and what they must now face. When a DNA test result is revealed, it does not merely provide an answer. It reshapes the story of everyone involved. What once felt certain may become uncertain. What once felt broken may begin to heal, or what once seemed stable may collapse. This is why so many people regret taking DNA tests. It is not the result they fear. It is the meaning behind the result. A parent-child relationship is more than biology. It is memory, nurture, presence, and sacrifice. Yet the law, especially in cases involving child support, must base responsibility on facts rather than feelings. The Supreme Court has upheld repeatedly that biological truth carries legal weight. The legal system must ensure that a child's needs are met, regardless of emotional discomfort. But the emotional layers beneath that legal clarity are complicated and deeply human. This tension reflects the larger relationship between law and justice. Law is structured, formal, regulated, consistent. Justice is emotional, contextual, and personal. Law prioritizes evidence. Justice prioritizes fairness and healing. Judge Lauren Lake works at the intersection of the two, acknowledging that a courtroom cannot erase heartbreak, but it can ensure truth is recognized and accountability is upheld. This brings us to the adverse inference in the Evidence Act, which allows the court to form conclusions when a person avoids providing evidence, such as refusing a DNA test. In many divorce cases, when one spouse resists testing, the court may infer fear of the truth. However, avoidance does not always come from deception. Sometimes it comes from emotional overwhelm. Individuals may fear that the truth will destroy the family identity they have grown to rely on. They may fear losing a child's love. They may fear public judgment. The law sees avoidance as suspicious. The heart sees it as survival. Judge Lauren Lake sees both. Because in family cases, the courtroom is not simply a place of justice. It is a place of transformation. This is also why the experiences shared in the Divorce Course podcast resonate with so many. Individuals speak openly about how evidence forced them to confront reality. They explain how truth did not necessarily end love, but it changed love. It reshaped how they saw one another. It forced them to redefine commitment. Many describe grief, but many describe relief as well. Relief that the pretending was over. Relief that clarity had finally come. In the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, attorneys explain how evidence, especially DNA evidence, can be either healing or devastating depending on how clients emotionally frame it. A DNA test may confirm a father, but it cannot guarantee a relationship. It may remove doubt, but it cannot remove resentment. It may reveal betrayal, but it cannot force forgiveness. Law provides the structure. The individuals provide the emotional meaning. This emotional meaning is explored deeply in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals reflect on how truth led them to rebuilding. They describe how acknowledging mistakes allowed them to reclaim dignity. They explain how vulnerability became strength once the fear of exposure was gone. These testimonies show that even when truth hurts, it frees. Healing does not begin with comfort. It begins with honesty. But honesty in cheating stories is often the hardest. When trust breaks, the family does not simply experience conflict. It experiences identity collapse. Partners begin to question everything. Was the relationship ever real? Did love once exist, or was it always a lie? Betrayal forces individuals to confront the fragility of intimacy. In the midst of that emotional chaos, a DNA test becomes a symbol, not just of truth, but of accountability, of consequences, of reconstruction. Judge Lauren Lake often reminds individuals that no one is entirely innocent and no one is entirely guilty. People make choices under pressure, loneliness, fear, longing, and sometimes self-protection. She encourages individuals to acknowledge mistakes without defining themselves by them. Her courtroom becomes a place where shame dissolves into accountability, and accountability becomes empowerment. This approach reflects the philosophical concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not about punishment alone. It is about restoration, preservation, the protection of dignity, the honoring of truth. True justice seeks not to break individuals, but to guide them toward responsibility and healing. The legal system may enforce consequences, but the emotional system must enforce understanding. In adoption, stories full episodes, the emotional truth is often more powerful than the biological truth. Adoptive parents may not share DNA with their children, but they share life. They share sacrifice. They share dreams. They share the courage to love without conditions. And yet, when adopted children seek their biological families later in life, it is not a rejection of the love they received. It is simply a search for identity. Humans instinctively want to know where they come from. This desire is not disloyalty. It is human nature. This same need for identity appears in court cases where children learn the truth only when they are older. The emotional shock can be profound. Some feel anger, others feel relief. Some feel confusion. All must transition from one understanding of self to another. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that children must be protected in these transitions. Truth should not be delivered as harm, but as clarity, as belonging expanded, not erased. This is why truth changes everything. Not because it destroys, but because it reveals. Truth reveals who people really are when the mask falls. Truth reveals who is willing to stay, who is willing to grow, who is willing to take responsibility. Truth reveals who loves the child, not for DNA, but for presence, care, and patience. Yet truth also reveals what must end. Some marriages collapse under truth. Some relationships cannot survive the weight of betrayal or the shock of revelation. These endings are not failures. They are transformations. Not all relationships are meant to last forever. Some relationships exist to teach lessons, build maturity, and prepare individuals for better futures. In the legal sphere, truth influences everything from custody arrangements to inheritance rights to parental authority. Child support rulings ensure that biological parents contribute to the child's needs, but emotional support cannot be legislated. Courts can require financial responsibility, but they cannot force love. That is why emotional healing must accompany legal resolution. And emotional healing is possible. It often begins with acceptance. Acceptance of what happened. Acceptance of who we are now. Acceptance of what must change moving forward. Recovery does not begin with forgiveness of others. It begins with forgiveness of oneself. Judge Lauren Lake encourages individuals to embrace this step. She reminds parents that children look to them for stability. Healing is not only personal, it is generational. A child's emotional future depends on how the adults handle truth today. A child does not need perfection. A child needs honesty, presence, and safety. The journey is difficult, but it is real, and it leads forward. Because whether painful or liberating, unwanted or long-awaited, truth changes the story. And once truth enters, the story cannot go back to what it was. In the courtroom guided by Judge Lauren Lake, truth does not simply appear. It must be confronted, understood, and accepted. When a DNA test enters the conversation, it becomes more than evidence. It becomes a mirror reflecting everything that has been avoided, denied, or misunderstood. And this reflection can be uncomfortable. Many people regret taking DNA tests not because they fear science, but because they fear change. They fear that the life they built emotionally will be challenged by a biological truth they did not expect. Yet the truth remains a necessary force. It prevents confusion from becoming a lifelong inheritance passed on to the next generation. The emotional impact of DNA results also reveals the fragile balance between law and justice. Law deals in clarity, justice deals in healing. The relationship between law and justice requires skillful navigation. And Judge Lauren Lake stands at the point where emotional reality and legal authority must align. She acknowledges tears, anger, confusion, pride, and heartbreak. She reminds individuals that truth is not an attack. It is the beginning of clarity. The concept of justice in jurisprudence emphasizes fairness, accountability, stability, and dignity. Justice must ensure that a child knows who they are, who they come from, and who is responsible for their well-being. Yet justice does not demand that biological ties must always become emotional ties. Families do not run on DNA alone. They run on presence, stability, patience, sacrifice, and love. This is why the courtroom is not a battlefield. It is a place of restructuring. The law provides order. The heart provides direction. Judge Lauren Lake encourages individuals not only to accept truth, but to grow from it. When DNA evidence is introduced in the evidence stage in a divorce case, the emotional stakes are even higher. A divorce is already a process of separating lives that were once intertwined. When questions of paternity emerge during divorce, the emotional pain multiplies. The individual must confront the end of a marriage while simultaneously reassessing identity as a parent. This double grief can feel overwhelming. In some cases, the parent learns they are not biologically connected to a child they have raised. The shock is deep, not because of biology, but because of love. The love was real. The memories were real. The attachment was real. And the truth does not erase that, but it does require a new understanding of identity. Judge Lauren Lake honors that emotional reality while still guiding individuals toward legal clarity. Other times, the DNA test confirms paternity and ends years of conflict. This truth can be a relief. A long-held question dissolves. The emotional weight lifts. The path forward becomes clearer. The individual can finally move into the next phase of life. The emotional journey of these revelations is often reflected in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals describe how truth, pain, surrender, and forgiveness led to healing. They speak of how strength was born, not in denial, but in honesty. In cheating stories, the emotional betrayal can feel more painful than the factual truth. Betrayal touches identity, self-worth, and the meaning of connection. In these situations, DNA testing becomes more than evidence. It becomes a confrontation with vulnerability. Judge Lauren Lake reminds individuals that acknowledging betrayal is not weakness. It is strength. It is clarity. It is dignity. The adverse inference in the Evidence Act appears when individuals avoid testing or avoid truth. But avoidance never prevents truth. It only delays it, and delayed truth becomes heavier. This emotional struggle appears as well in adoption stories' full episodes, where individuals seek connection to biological roots, while also honoring the family who raised them. The emotional reality here is complex. Love can exist in multiple directions. Identity can expand. The heart has room for both belonging and curiosity. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that identity cannot be forced. It must unfold naturally. When the truth is finally spoken aloud in the courtroom, the emotional silence afterward is often powerful. It is the moment when life divides into before and after. This division is not always tragic. Sometimes it is transformative. Truth does not only close chapters, it opens new ones. And this transformation is especially meaningful for children. Child support decisions, custody arrangements, emotional access, and co-parenting responsibilities are not about punishing parents. They are about protecting the child's well-being. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that children must never be treated as leverage, proof, or bargaining tools. A child is not evidence. A child is a life. The legal system can assign responsibility, but emotional acceptance must be chosen. And that choice may take time. Healing is not immediate. Healing is gradual. Healing is a process of understanding what truth means in daily life. Truth may reveal that a relationship must end. If a marriage cannot survive betrayal or pain, sometimes separation becomes the path to peace. A family can evolve without breaking. Parenting can continue without partnership. Respect can remain without romance. Other times, truth strengthens bonds. The revelation becomes a turning point where individuals commit to honesty, communication, and emotional clarity. They rebuild trust on new foundations, stronger than what came before. In every case, truth changes everything, not because truth destroys, but because truth reveals reality. Healing does not come from pretending. Healing comes from clarity. Judge Lauren Lake reminds individuals that they are not defined by the mistakes that brought them to the courtroom. They are defined by the choices they make afterward. They have the capacity to learn, repair, nurture, protect, and grow. The truth is not the end of their story. It is the beginning of their next chapter. In the end, truth is not the enemy. Pain is not failure. Healing is not weakness. And justice is not a punishment. Justice is a chance to begin again. Because once truth enters the room, lives shift, identities are reshaped, families transform, and the past, however painful, becomes the foundation for a more honest future. Truth changes everything, and sometimes everything needed to change.